Rachel Miller was pushed to the edge by a labyrinth of corruption that erased witnesses and buried the truth. At the heart of the conspiracy stood Deputy Director Robert Grayson, whose power games endangered innocent lives and unleashed outrage across the justice system. But Rachel's determination sparked a daring move, turning her vulnerability into the biggest revelation the FBI had ever seen. Just listen to how this tense drama unfolded and why, in the end, justice truly prevailed. Rachel Miller walked briskly through the imposing marble hallways of the federal courthouse, her gaze fixed and precise, refusing to be distracted by the idle chatter of colleagues or the ever-watchful eyes of security guards. The echo of her heels against the polished floor was steady, a rhythm that mirrored the certainty she tried to project. For most, Rachel was enigmatic, her reputation built not on fiery speeches or bold gestures, but on a methodical drive that often unsettled the guilty and comforted the innocent. Yet beneath this calm exterior, Rachel was haunted by the mysteries of her latest case. On her desk lay a file marked with red tape and the names of witnesses who had seemingly disappeared from the city's radar. It wasn't unusual for witnesses to grow cold feet, but here, seasoned officials were vanishing so suddenly and cleanly it felt less like flight and more like erasure. The energy in her department had shifted. Doors were closing more frequently, conversations paused as she entered, and higher-ups dodged her questions under the guise of national security. That Tuesday morning, Rachel's routine was disrupted by a small white envelope lying on the seat of her car. The handwriting was neat, familiar, but untraceable. Inside was a single sheet, cryptic in tone but rich in implication. Project Sentinel, it read, with a scatter of references to internal operations, anonymous transfers, and a warning. Trust is a luxury now. Rachel felt a pang of unease, not quite fear, but the subtle intuition she'd learned never to ignore during her years in law. As she moved through her day, the envelope weighed on her thoughts. In meetings, she watched expressions subtly shift when the case number was mentioned. Her assistant, Mark, joked nervously about security upgrades, but Rachel barely smiled. Later, in the privacy of her office, Rachel examined the envelope under a desk lamp, turning over each word like keys to a puzzle. Project Sentinel pointed to something deeply entrenched in the federal system, a web designed not just for intelligence but for controlling those investigating it. Was she now a target, or simply a distraction for those hiding the truth? Rachel's backstory was marked by relentless pursuit of justice from a young age. Raised in a small Connecticut town by police officer parents, she'd witnessed firsthand the cost of standing up to corruption and the toll it took on families. This shaped her ironclad sense of fairness as an adult, but also seeded a distrust for easy answers and institutional reassurances. Every detail in the new case grated at her. Witnesses had received threats with terminology Rachel recognized from classified briefings. Evidence had been archived improperly. The documents she requested began arriving with blank redactions, as if someone wanted her to see just enough to remain interested and just little enough to stall her progress. As the workday ended, Rachel didn't rush to leave. She pulled out a legal notepad and began mapping connections. Who gained from these disappearances? Which agents were reassigned as soon as questions emerged? The more she thought, the more she sensed the operation's scope reached higher than any previous case, possibly implicating those tasked with her protection. Her motivation was driven less by career ambition and more by an unwavering loyalty to the stories of those left voiceless. Rachel recalled the face of a mother in a witness meeting, begging for assurance that the trial would finally bring closure. The promise Rachel made that day burned in her memory, fueling her every step now. In the days that followed, Rachel sharpened her focus. She began refusing invitations to informal meetings, asking pointed questions in email chains, and logging every interaction in a private journal. The agents assigned to her case became more distant, their explanations more rehearsed. Someone from technical support, accidentally, wiped her office desktop one afternoon, an act she logged in her notebook as convenient. Each night, Rachel studied the city from her apartment window, mentally revisiting every detail, every odd expression, every casual mention of Sentinel. Her instincts screamed that time was running short, and that someone somewhere was hoping she'd give up before anyone noticed the connection between missing witnesses and federal internal operations. The suspense grew thicker when a longtime friend in the department called, voice low and shaken, warning her to take care and not press too far right now. Rachel thanked him, but the call only confirmed her suspicion. Someone knew, and someone was watching. Her world narrowed to tense silences, coded glances, and a single promise, the one she made to never accept a sanitized version of the truth. For Rachel, the chase itself was never about glory. It was about living up to the expectations of those who believed justice should not bend before secret fears or hidden agendas. As Rachel prepared her next set of subpoenas, her pulse steadied. She knew the stakes were rising, but her resolve had hardened. Whether the truth set her free or cost her everything, she would not let it vanish, even if she had to stand alone against powers determined to keep it buried. The first chapter of her ordeal was just a breath before the storm. Rachel stepped out of the courthouse just after sunset, feeling the chill of fall settle over the city. The day had weighed on her, each moment crowded by uneasy glances and unfinished conversations. As she reached the quiet parking lot, her mind replayed the latest clues, fragmented cryptic references to Project Sentinel still echoing on every page she'd studied. Her senses sharpened, but she brushed off the familiar paranoia. Nothing about the night felt different, yet Rachel's instincts warned her to stay alert. She unlocked her car and slid into the driver's seat, scanning the rearview mirror before starting the engine. As she reached for her seatbelt, sudden movement caught her eye. The silence was shattered by a flash of light and the explosive sound of glass splintering. Time seemed to slow as her body reacted, adrenaline surging, mind frantic, heart pounding. A sharp pain radiated from her shoulder, but training and instinct ordered her to act. Rachel ducked low, fumbling for her phone, struggling to keep control as panic threatened to take over. Her vision blurred with pain, but she made out a shadow fleeing into the night. The attacker disappeared without a trace, blending instantly into the busy street beyond. Rachel, still conscious, realized how quickly her safety could slip away. The feeling was less fear and more stunned confusion. Her world, once built on calculation and law, now underscored by real danger she had never invited. When the emergency team arrived, Rachel was coherent, yet distant. Her thoughts racing ahead, searching for meaning in what just happened. A senior agent insisted she accept full protection immediately, and within hours, Rachel found herself in a guarded hospital room, her arm bandaged, her badge taken for security review. Colleagues she trusted avoided her eyes, and reports of the incident officially listed it as a simple, random act. But Rachel recognized patterns where others saw accidents. The attacker was not random, and the message was clear. Rachel's vulnerability became impossible to ignore. Privacy vanished as hospital staff checked her credentials. Questions about her case were redirected, and she was discouraged from handling work on her own. The documents she tried to access online were suddenly restricted. Her email flagged for suspicious activity. She felt surrounded, uncertain whom to trust, unsettled by the subtle signals of containment. Through pain and frustration, Rachel's determination deepened. The attempt on her life was a warning, not only to her, but to anyone daring to shine a light beneath the surface. Despite physical weakness, she quietly made notes, drawing connections between shadowy hints from Project Sentinel and the abrupt change in the department's behavior. She couldn't ignore the evidence. There were hands guiding this storm, and the target wasn't only herself, it was the truth. As Rachel recovered, flashes of doubt and resolve dueled within her. Every kind gesture seemed loaded with ulterior motives. Every regulation cited now suspect. Her sense of isolation grew, fueled by the knowledge that someone had crossed a line to silence her. And yet the shock didn't defeat her. In those quiet, sleepless hours, Rachel resolved to push back even harder, knowing that the only way forward was to confront what threatened to destroy her work, even if the odds now felt impossibly steep. This chapter marked a turning point. Rachel could no longer simply investigate. She had to survive as she searched for answers. Rachel's days in the hospital blurred into restless nights, a cycle fueled by frustration and a haunting sense of isolation. She watched the world move outside through security glass, her mind charting plans while her body struggled to heal. Every detail from her investigation hovered at the edge of her thoughts, refusing to fade. The attack confirmed her suspicions. Someone powerful intended to derail her search for the truth. She remained outwardly composed, but inside Rachel felt anger building with every forced reassurance from agents assigned to protect her. Behind closed doors, those agents spoke carefully. Their bureaucratic responses skimmed of empathy. Their concern felt superficial, as if each answer was rehearsed for the benefit of protocol, not her safety. Rachel sensed that her status had changed, not just a victim, but a warning to others who might follow her path. Determined to retain control, Rachel quietly requested her personal laptop and phone. Hospital officials initially denied her, then relented only after she invoked her authority as a federal prosecutor. When she regained access to her data, Rachel's fingers trembled, not from pain, but from anticipation. Lines of encrypted messages, previously overlooked in the routine of her work, now seemed urgent and ominous. One, marked as priority internal, referenced surveillance software activated on her government-issued devices days before the attack. Another hinted at meetings held in her absence, with agenda items that matched keywords from the Project Sentinel memo. Fueled by these revelations, Rachel began connecting her situation to larger patterns of obstruction and secrecy. She took notes in coded shorthand, careful to keep them out of view, and drafted a message to a trusted journalist who had previously covered federal misconduct. This act felt risky, yet necessary. Rachel's years in the legal system had taught her to recognize fear disguised as loyalty. Now she saw it everywhere. The emotional tension escalated. She scrolled through public statements made by senior officials, each denying any knowledge of internal threats, each more vague than the last. She remembered interviews with victims, their hope for justice now tangled with her own predicament. The truth wasn't simply elusive, it was guarded by those she'd once considered partners in law. Moments of doubt crept in between surges of resolve. Rachel agonized over the threat to witnesses who had trusted her, the possibility that they too had suffered similar fates. The question haunted her. How far would those behind Project Sentinel go to shield their secrets? Bitter determination overtook uncertainty as she pressed forward. At night, Rachel composed encrypted messages to the journalist, describing her ordeal and the evidence she'd uncovered. She withheld certain details. She knew that full disclosure would come at greater risk, but refused to let fear dictate silence. The process of revealing the conspiracy felt cathartic, transforming her anger into resolve. Hiding her activities from those assigned to protect her required caution and cunning. Rachel feigned sleep when doctors visited, then worked late when she sensed she was alone. She reinforced her commitment to uncovering the truth, aware that every advance increased the risk both to herself and to anyone who stood in her way. By week's end, Rachel was ready to deliver her findings. She arranged to meet the journalist in a bustling public atrium, where anonymity offered protection, and handed over a cache of documents that implicated key agency figures in the operation. Watching the files disappear into a secure backpack, she felt a surge of relief and dread, knowing the disclosure marked a point of no return. Rachel's anger had evolved. Now, standing at the crossroads of her campaign for justice, she understood that being silenced was never a real option. By revealing the truth, Rachel ensured that those who tried to suppress her and the victims she sought to protect would no longer be forgotten. The fight had grown larger than her. It was a battle for transparency in a world built on secrets and denial. Rachel's stay in the hospital became a tense waiting game, each minute stretching into hours marked by uncertainty and silent frustration. She felt an urgent need to act, yet her body forced her to slow down. The bandages on her shoulder were a constant reminder, not only of the attack, but of how close she came to losing control over her own investigation. She spent restless nights analyzing digital traces on her phone, cross-referencing every message and call. Rachel suspected she was being monitored, her communications subtly redirected, and her request for case files met with deliberate delays. She observed the agents assigned to her, searching their faces for clues about their true allegiances, often finding only polite indifference and bureaucratic caution. The investigation had shifted beyond missing witnesses. Now it was personal. Rachel's anger, simmering beneath her composed exterior, grew stronger with each obstacle. Former allies acted distant, and she recognized veiled threats hidden in official statements. She was left with little room to trust anyone, as even familiar colleagues seemed to deliver information carefully, always watching for a response. Determined not to be defeated, Rachel secretly contacted Nate Foster, a journalist known for his careful handling of government leaks. With carefully encrypted messages, she laid out fragments of the conspiracy, the evidence of shadow operations, inexplicable redactions, suspicious witness transfers, and the presence of Project Sentinel in internal communications. Each interaction was laced with tension. Rachel double-checked meeting places, altered her routine, and kept backup notes hidden in places only she would think to look. She knew the risk she was taking, not just for herself, but for everyone involved. Rachel's motivation sharpened. The promise she'd made to those counting on her was now a driving force. She replayed the stories of victims, their hope and desperation echoing in her mind. Anger became resolve as she pieced together the final connections. The realization was bitter. Her opponents held immense power, yet their very secrecy made them vulnerable to exposure. When evidence was finally in Nate's hands, Rachel felt a rush of conflicting emotions, relief, anxiety, and a deep sense of responsibility. She had crossed a line. There would be no turning back. The truth was now alive, outside her hospital room, beyond the reach of those who wanted it buried. For Rachel, the fight was no longer about personal safety. It was about exposing something far darker, ensuring justice could not be silenced by fear. Rachel's life changed irrevocably after the files made their way to the journalist's hands. The story erupted, its impact immediate and far-reaching. Project Sentinel was exposed for what it truly was, a covert operation designed to manipulate, silence, and control those who threatened powerful interests. News outlets quickly picked up the story. Broadcast headlines echoed in offices and homes, and the federal justice system was thrown into turmoil. Dozens of officials called emergency meetings. Some tried to deny involvement, while others resigned without explanation. Rachel watched this unfolding chaos from the careful distance of a guarded apartment, her world now confined, but her purpose unbroken. Inside, she felt a strange blend of relief and apprehension. The weight that had pressed down for weeks finally began to lighten, yet the risks of her actions demanded constant vigilance. Rachel reviewed encrypted emails and brief calls, planning safe routes through the city and avoiding places where she could be easily recognized. Despite the security measures, she knew her anonymity was fragile. Revealing the operation had shifted her status from investigator to key witness, her life now entwined with a national scandal. The department sent out statements, distancing itself from key players named in the documents. Public figures demanded inquiries, and social networks buzzed with theories and debates. Some praised Rachel's courage, casting her as a principled defender of justice. Others accused her of betrayal or questioned her motives. The tension between vindication and uncertainty was palpable. Privately, Rachel reflected on everything she had lost: professional standing, a sense of normalcy, faith in certain colleagues, but she also discovered an unexpected sense of peace. The truth had been spoken, and its resonance could not be undone. Rachel traded fear for acceptance, knowing that while she could no longer return to her previous life, she had achieved something lasting and necessary. In the days that followed, Rachel was called to testify before investigative committees. The process was quiet, methodical, and emotionally demanding. Still, as she sat facing panel members and relayed her experiences in measured, honest detail, Rachel found her voice steadier than ever. Pain and anxiety remained, but each word spoken in the pursuit of transparency granted her renewed clarity. The public's response evolved as more facts surfaced. Rachel received messages of support from across the country, some formal, some deeply personal. People who once viewed the system as untouchable now recognized the need for oversight and courage from within. Rachel realized her actions had become a catalyst. A single story had set off a wave of renewed commitment to truth. On a clear morning, Rachel stood on the courthouse steps. Reporters clustered nearby and addressed the nation. Her statement was direct, hopeful, and final. She had made her choice not for fame or revenge, but for accountability. The scandal would change lives, prompt reforms, and remind everyone involved that the truth mattered, even when it came at great cost. Rachel's journey had transformed her into something more than prosecutor. She was now a symbol of resilience, her sacrifice inspiring others to reach for the same integrity. With quiet strength, Rachel accepted the consequences and looked ahead, ready to face the next chapter, her role redefined, but her commitment unshaken.